Welcome to you all. My name is Rob Burke. I'll be your instructor for the workshop here today. We're here to look at the ArcGIS Pro SDK for .NET and get started with doing some programming with it. In order to present the material, I'm using a story map over here, and this is the URL to get to the story map. Also, if you've got one of these little snippets of paper, the URL and my email address are here also. What exactly is a story map? It really doesn't have anything to do with us. I'm using it for my delivery technique instead of using PowerPoint or some other technique. So this URL will get you to everything that I'm going to be using in the class. And the URL will be up and available here. It's just part of the title. So as I move through here, you'll see the URL right up here. Anytime you want to get to this site, you can either grab a sheet of paper up here or you'll see it here. Well, this workshop is a little bit different than some of the other workshops maybe that you've been to here at the Developer Summit. It's mainly a hands-on workshop. So you're going to be doing some of the work here and not me talking to you the whole time. So I'll do a couple of demos to get us going on a couple of the sections. But for the most part, you're going to be doing some hands-on activities, hands-on work to try some of this stuff out. So my goal is, if you haven't used Pro to do any customization work or extending work, by the time we're done here, hopefully you'll have a really good sense of what you can do, and you'll have practiced in a lot of the different main development patterns and get to know those patterns. I'm an instructor at Esri. I work in the Redlands office and teach many of the programming and the ArcGIS Enterprise Portal Server and some of the basic training classes that Esri offers. As far as our agenda goes, we're here from 9 until 3:30. And I've split up the time into 4 sections. So these are the 4 main topics that we're going to cover here. And I've tried to organize them based on the regular sessions and their break times so that we can do a little bit of work. And then when the break time comes along, you can take a break. But if you want to keep working at the break time, you can do that also. So when we get started here, I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction to add-ins and configurations. And then I have some hands-on lessons for you that are prepared and scripted out. And then I'm going to turn it over to you to try out making an add-in and making a solution configuration. At 10 o'clock, there's a regularly scheduled break time, so you can take a bit of a break or keep working. And then at 10:30, I'm going to give a little bit of a description, do some demos on states and conditions and events and hooking. And then I've got another set of hands-on for you to try out. If one or more of these sound interesting to you as we talk about them, you can try one of them or all of them or however you want to do it. We have our lunch time. There's a lunch break. 11:30 to 1, but you're welcome to stay here and keep working or grab lunch and come back and keep experimenting. I've got a lot of hands-on lessons that you can try out, so shouldn't be any downtime if you're looking for what to do next. I've tried to put these lessons in a particular order so that as you get started, you want to learn about the basics of making an add-in and a configuration, but then you got to figure out some of the wiring stuff, like what are the conditions and events and how do you work with those. And then after lunch, we'll come back and talk about the threading model. People talk about Pro being multi-threaded and 64-bit. And how do we, on the programming side, how do we deal with that threading model? We have to learn about what a queued task is, what a task is, and what just the basics of the threading model for ArcGIS Pro and how we work with it. You'll have to work with within the restrictions or restraints or the basic parts of the threading model. At about 2 o'clock, there's another break time, so we'll finish up there at 2:30, and then we'll move on to the last lesson where we'll look at connecting to projects, interacting with the data inside of a project, connecting to a portal, and then doing things like creating a new feature class in a Geodatabase or getting a feature class and adding it to a map. And from there, we've got some more hands-on lessons for you to work on till the end of the day. How's that sound? Sounds okay. All right. I see some thumbs up in the back. All right. And then I'll be here, of course, the whole time facilitating the whole event. But every once in a while, in and out, we'll get some of the developers from the ArcGIS Pro SDK team that'll be coming in and out throughout the day. So eventually, I don't know when they're going to come in and out, but they've told me that they'll be here like around our exercise times so that if there's any questions that come up, I'll work on answering them to the best of my ability, but they're also the experts in their particular areas, so they'll be in and out to observe and answer questions also. If you've just come in, this is the URL that I'm going to be using here, and I'll leave that right up at the top of the lesson here. All right, so as we continue through here, you might want to prepare your computer. I don't know if all of you have or not, but in order to work through the hands-on lessons, you'll need to have Visual Studio, of course, and Pro installed. With Visual Studio, I'm just using the Community Edition, so if you don't have Visual Studio, through the links here, you can just click on the links and it'll take you to the Visual Studio setup. And, whoops. There you go. So I've got all the links set up for installing and setting up Pro and the licensing of Pro. If you don't have Pro, you can even get a trial version of ArcGIS Pro, a free 21-day trial if you don't have a copy. And then in the course, we'll probably be using the samples, the community samples, and the data that goes with them. If you want to download the community samples, there's a link right here that'll take you to the page where, or it'll take you to a description of how to download the community samples. So there's the web page to go to, click on community samples, click the green download. I've got all the instructions here to do that downloading right there and linked to you. If you have questions about Pro and the terminology, I've linked over to the terminology guide so that anytime you have a question about a keyword or some object that we're not familiar with, we can look at the terminology guide. At any time, if you have questions, please say something. There's not that many of you out there, so you can raise your hand if you want or just speak up and say something, and that'd be great. Anybody have any questions so far? All right. I'm working off of this idea here about how you retain information. So in the workshop here, I'm hoping to get you over to the left side here where, yes, I'll show you some things. You'll see me do a couple of demos and you'll hear me talking about it. But I want you to be doing these things and trying them out so that you'll have a better retention of what you learn here. So that's what we're going for in this workshop, is giving you the hands-on experience so that you have these guided lessons that you can work through and ask questions along the way. And hopefully you'll take some of those with you and remember what you've done here and be able to put it to use right away. All right, so our first lesson here, we're going to look at getting started with creating an add-in and creating a solution configuration. The link I've got in here, you should always get started with the landing page. Go to the Pro SDK landing page. And this is a page that I have linked all the time because I'm always going to the landing page because I need help looking up something in the API, or maybe I need to look at one of the samples because I know there's some good code over there that I want to copy and paste and make use of it for myself. And then also here is the documentation. So, of course, this is one of the main pages you should have ready to go. And at any time, when you have a question, usually you can go through here and find it in the API or find some documentation about the topic or maybe even find a community sample. Right below there, we have these, they call them dev labs. And these are like short 15-minute hands-on kind of lessons that you could do on your own. So there's building an add-in, building a configuration, building an identify tool, constructing features, and preparing data for use offline. You might take a look at these if they're of interest to you. You might try them out while you're here, or try them out when you get back home next week or next month. Give them a try. There's some concepts here, the key concepts. So if you're getting ready to work in a new area of the API that you haven't used before, like the utility network is fairly new, you want to read up on the topic and then explore the samples and find out if there's any extra documentation that you might want to be aware of. All right, so coming back to our course page here, I'm about ready to start doing some demonstrations, but after the demonstrations, I have some hands-on exercises set up for you. So these are just PDF files, and so I'll be doing some demonstrations here to create an add-in and a configuration, and then I'm going to have you all give it a try on your own. So as you're getting ready, or I'll come back to that part. All right, so let's get started here. Oh, I'm going to go ahead and start up a configuration. So with a solution configuration, you get your own splash screen. You design that splash screen. And then with a configuration, you also get the startup page. When Pro starts up, there's always the splash screen and there's a start page. And on the start page, your user is either opening an existing project or they're creating a new project. With a solution configuration, you can customize the way ArcGIS Pro starts up. So instead of having the regular splash screen and the regular start page, you can make your own. So here, this is a really custom start page where our user doesn't have the chance to open a new project, but they can click on this map and find projects that are already there based on geographies, based on counties. So if I go to San Diego over here, Pro opens up, it opens that project, and when it opens the project, you can see up at the top that there's some customization that's happened. So the tabs are gone. Most of the regular Pro tabs are gone. A couple of weeks ago, I was working in Iowa with the DOT office over there, and they wanted to customize their startup. And they wanted a couple of things they were interested in doing were car crash analysis and monitoring their snow plows. They have their snow plows are they all have those GPS things on them, so the snow plows are all live, and they also have a video camera. So when they go to the snow plows, they can bring up a map, They can see the snowplows driving around. They can click on one on the map and they can see a video, a live video from the snowplow to see if it's snowing or not or what's going on over there. Anyway, with a solution configuration, you get to decide what tabs should appear in Pro. You can keep any of the existing tabs, but you could remove them and put your tabs up there. And then the other thing with Pro is add-ins. An add-in delivers some extra functionality. So here I've got an add-in that delivers a whole bunch of buttons over here. I've got 7 buttons in here. But so we're talking about 2 patterns of customization or extending ArcGIS Pro. Add-ins are a way for you to deliver functionality like buttons and tools and extra tabs. Solution configurations are a little bit more encompassing, where they're helping you to get the project open to the user and decide what functionality that user needs. So a solution configuration is a little bit more than an add-in. It could contain add-ins and extra functionality, but it also helps you to customize the startup of how Pro shows its startup page and what it looks like when it opens to the user. Part of that startup process is also determining the user. Who is the user and what portal are they connected into? Are they connected into ArcGIS Online or their own organization's portal? And from there, in the configuration, you could find out what portal they're connected to and what groups they belong to. And maybe you have a full customization of the startup per person or per group that they belong to. So if you have different groups in the organization, Pro could look different to one group than it does to another group. Because you can find out who's logged in, and then based on that information, you could decide what tabs that person needs based on the group they belong to. So we have 2 customization patterns that we've been looking at here: add-ins and solution configurations. And what I want to do now is let's go ahead and build both of these. I'll do the add-ins first and then solution configurations after that. And then we'll have some hands-on time where you can try it out also. So here I am, I've got Visual Studio going, and I'm going to create a new project. When I go about creating the new project, I can see that, okay, I'm under Visual Studio and ArcGIS, and I've got the ArcGIS Pro add-ins templates here. There's a template to create add-ins and a template to create solution configurations. Oh, let me go ahead and I'm going to start by making an add-in. All right, as Visual Studio gets going, it's going to generate a project for me that is set up to build an add-in. So it's going to have lots of folders and references and files created. One of the files that gets created is a DAML file. DAML is for the Desktop Application Markup Language. It's like Esri's version of XML or XAML if you're in the WPF programming. So that's all it is. The DAML describes what the user interface of Pro should look like based on your add-in. So here I'm getting ready to build an add-in. And when I look at the DAML, there's some description down here to describe, given this add-in that I'm about to build, what controls does it contain? Well, I don't have any yet. What tabs does it have? And then per tab, what groups are available per tab? And then within the group, are there any buttons or tools or controls that should appear inside that group? So here, I'm inside of a module, and with an add-in, you can deliver functionality, but you could also update or change functionality, or you could remove it. So I'm in a module here called the Insert module. That means I'm going to be inserting new functionality. With the Update module, that could be that, I want to update one of the existing tabs and I want to put my button on an existing tab. So I could use Update module to change some of the existing tabs and groups and organize them. And then there's Delete module, which I could use to remove a tab or remove a button that I don't want my users to see. Well, for now, I'm building an add-in and I want to add a button. My add-in is going to contain a button. So I'm coming here over to the project, and just like you would add other items into the project, I'm going to add a new item here. Okay, so right-click, Add Item. And you'll see that we have more templates in here for each of the different kinds of controls that you can add. So if we look through the list, you'll see things like buttons and dock panes and galleries, and down at the bottom there's tools. So there are various controls that you can add to Pro. Your add-in can contain one or more of these controls. So you could have many buttons or a mixture of buttons and tools and dock panes that your add-in delivers. Well, I'm going to create a button, and I'm going to just go ahead with all the defaults here. After I create the new button, you can see that it's created. Let me come over here into the project. It's created the button's C# file. And when we look in there, there's the click event. It's all stubbed out and ready to go and ready for me to add some code in here. I'm going to leave it empty to start off with. And let's take a look back at the DAML and see how it's changed a little bit. Earlier, there was no button. Now I've got a new button in here. There's some elements in here that are describing the button and its caption. And the button is part of a group. So my button over here has been added to this group. The group has a name, and right now the group is going to be added to a tab called Add-in. The name of the tab is Add-in. And this new button is going to appear on the Add-in tab. I'm going to go ahead and start Pro, and let's take a look at what this add-in delivers to Pro. All right, as Pro starts up, I'm going to open up a project here. As I get my project open, you can see there's a tab called Add-in. And when I have a look at the Add-in tab, you'll see my 7 buttons from before, but then you'll see my new button added in over here. I don't have any code behind this button, so it doesn't really do anything when I click on it. But yeah, now I could go ahead and write some code to run when somebody clicks on this button. You might notice I have a Palm Springs tab over here. What's over there? Oh, you can add tabs without doing any programming. So a user could go to the project backstage area. They could go to the options area, and they can customize the ribbon. And then here in the customize the ribbon area, well, they could make a new tab. And then after they make the new tab, they could come over here to look for commands to add to that tab. So here, a regular old user could build their own tabs and organize a series of buttons and tools that they use often, they could make a favorites tab without doing much programming at all, but just organizing buttons and tools that are already there. All right, let me come back here. I'm going to go ahead and let's come back to the code here. I'm going to make just a quick change. So instead of having my button appear on the Add-in tab, I'm going to make my own tab. So here, I'll make a new tab. Let's see here. I'm not very creative, so I'm just going to call it Rob's tab. All right, and then I'm going to change the group. And I'm going to change the name or the caption on the button. All right, let's see what I did here. So I've taken the tab here that was commented out and I've opened it up. I've given it a caption. I've changed the caption here of the group. I need to delete this line so that my button will now appear on its own tab. So here I'm using the desktop application markup language to make my own tab, make a group, and then place my button into that group. All right, let's go ahead and start up Pro again. And let's see what the user interface looks like now. Before, I had the Palm Springs tab, I had the Add-in tab, and now there's an extra one, Rob's tab over here. And when I come up to my tab, you can see that, oh yeah, there's my button, Add Points, and it belongs to the editing group. So on the DAML side, you're customizing the user interface and designing the user interface. And then there's the programming side to write the code that goes with that control. Now I'm going back to the backstage area, and I'm going to the Add-in Manager. Here in the Add-in Manager, you can see the add-ins that I've been building. This is the one that I've been working on today. This is the one from yesterday that has those 6 buttons in it. Let's say I wanted to get rid of the one with 6 buttons in it. I could delete the add-in. There's a delete over here. However, when Pro starts up, it looks for those add-ins. So if I delete this add-in and get rid of it, and then go back over here to the Add-in tab, the buttons are still there. I need to restart. I need to do a restart of Pro so that it rereads and looks for any add-ins to add into Pro. Before I do that, we need to come back here to the Add-in Manager. When Pro starts up, it looks into your user profile location. So here it's going to my user profile under Documents, ArcGIS Add-ins, and Pro, and it's looking for any add-in files that are there. Any add-ins in this folder will be used to extend Pro. Pro reads those add-ins and then builds its user interface from there. So if I go to that folder, go to the C drive, go to the users and my own user profile and my documents and ArcGIS add-ins. Here we are. You can see that I've got one add-in over there now because remember I deleted the add-in that I worked on yesterday. So now if I start up a fresh Pro, I should see just this one add-in. Pro is looking to this user profile location. Any add-ins in there, it brings in. So here as Pro opens up, you can see my extra tab up here. You can see the add-in tab is still there, but the 6 buttons are gone. So my first add-in is now gone. When you look at my tab, I've got my button here. When you look at the add-in tab, anybody know why my button is still on the add-in tab? What did I forget to do? I forgot to delete this line of code. So my button appears on the add-in tab, but it's also going to appear on the Rob tab too. So I keep forgetting to delete this line here. All right, the other point I wanted to make about add-ins, and then we'll look at configurations, is that with add-ins, they're delivered to Pro as it starts up. So Pro looks in your user profile folder. It can also look to other folders too. So here in the add-in manager, you can set up folders where Pro should go to look for other add-in files. It could look over the network somewhere. You could have a network share and have everybody point to that network share, and then when everybody starts up Pro, their Pro will look into that network share location for any add-ins and then bring them into Pro. All right, I'm going to stop Visual Studio here for now. Actually, I'll leave that one going. I'm going to start up a fresh Visual Studio, and now we'll look at configurations to see how they're a little bit different. So I'll follow the same pattern of creating a new project, but this time instead of creating an add-in, when I get to the templates up here, I'm going to create a configuration. All right, and then as I follow through here, the project gets generated. In the project, I can see that, oh yeah, there's some similarities here. There's a DAML file. There's a module here. There's an extra configuration manager that's been created, though. And there's an extra folder, the UI folder. With configurations, you have control over the splash screen and the startup page. And you can add information into the About page. The way that you do that is by working on these WPF controls. So the splash screen, if I go to the sample splash screen that you get to get started here, there isn't much to it. It's just a white banner with some text on it. But yeah, then you'd go in here and change the graphics here to make them more customization to you or to the organization that you're developing for, using their branding of colors and logos and that sort of thing. You could design their splash screen to be very customized. And then the start page. It's also a WPF control. Let me just build here so we can get the start page up. So you get a default start page that, in this case, helps your user select a project or browse to find a project. This is just a WPF control, so over on the left side, in the toolbox, you could use any of the common WPF controls and you could drag them and drop them and design your own startup page. So you get a startup page here to get going, but more than likely, you're probably going to fully customize the way the start page looks. These are WPF controls, so instead of DAML, they have the Microsoft XAML behind them, the XML over here, where you design what the user control looks like, what the WPF control looks like. On the About page, you can write in a little bit of information here that will get inserted into the ArcGIS Pro About page. Let's see here. All right. Whoops. Okay, so here I could put a little, just a quick change here to the UI of the About page. Let me do the same on the splash screen, just so we get a little customization here to look at when I get the configuration going. Splash screen. Okay. Okay. Let's see, so we've gone over this. Okay. Oh, and then I want to take you into the configuration manager. In the configuration manager, there are several overrides. The overrides tell Pro to use your startup page or your splash screen or your about page. So there's kind of a two-part here. You go about designing those other pages, but then you have to do an override so that within this configuration, Pro knows, oh, okay, you want to override the start page. Okay, let's use your start page. Or you want to use your splash screen? Okay, well, come on in here to override the splash screen and point to your splash screen instead of Esri's splash screen. The overrides here are optional, so you can pick and choose which of these you would like to override. You don't have to override them all. Maybe if you're fine with the regular Pro splash screen, you can just leave that. You don't have to take over the splash screen. You decide what overrides are best for you. A couple other things you might want to override could be the application name. So you, instead of seeing something like ArcGIS Pro, you might have a special name for your app over here. You might want to use your image or the organization's image or logo of some kind as the image that appears in the Pro upper left corner. All right, let me go ahead and start up the configuration, and we'll see that Pro is now going to have my splash screen. And after the splash screen, it's going to have my startup page. Well, not mine, but the one that comes as the default start page. And then I can pick a project, or I can browse for one and open up that project. Within this solution configuration, I haven't taken over the tabs up here. So with my configuration, I haven't overridden that aspect of the solution configuration, but that would be the next step for me to take over and control what tabs appear to the user. Oh, where does the configuration go? Like with add-ins, the add-in goes to my user profile folder. With configurations, they don't go to the user profile, they go to the public profile. Let me navigate over here into the public profile. All right, so here, under the public profile, you'll find that I've made a couple of configurations here over the last couple of days, but let's see, here's the one that I was just working on here. How does Pro know which configuration to use when it starts up? Well, I'm going to grab my configuration here by name. Copy that. You might have noticed when I first started Pro earlier today, when it started up with the custom splash screen and the custom start page with the California map, I actually clicked on this icon here on this desktop shortcut. So it's actually through the desktop shortcut that you get the configuration started. So let me right-click here on the shortcut, and you'll see that we've added something. Instead of just Pro exe in the shortcut, we've got a /config, and then the name of the configuration that we would like Pro to open with. So I just created my Palm Springs configuration. I'm going to change the name here to that configuration and apply it and click OK. And then now when I start up Pro from this desktop icon, it's my Palm Springs solution configuration that starts up. And then here you can see the custom title, and there's a custom logo over in the upper left corner there. If I go to the backstage area, you can see my about information has been added and integrated in with Pro's regular about page. All right, so for now, I want to have you try these things out yourselves. So what we're set up for here, let me bring up the website here. Whoops. There we go. We are right in here on lesson 1. And within lesson 1, there's 3 exercises for you to try out. These are 3 hands-on activities. The first one is to create an add-in. The second one is to create a configuration. And then the third one is to do a customization of the solution configuration using that manager class, so that you'll take over and do some of those overrides in the third exercise. The challenge part here is go to the community samples. If you have time, try out one or more of the community samples. Each of these links should take you to a PDF file. And then in the PDF file, there are some loosely written instructions of how to create an add-in and how to create a solution configuration, and then how to customize that configuration. So for now, I'm going to turn things over to you all to try out some of these hands-on parts. It's about 9:42, and according to our schedule, we have until about 10:30 before the next lesson starts. So you've got about 45 minutes to try out some of these hands-on lessons here for lesson 1. To get started, if you haven't linked already to this page where I've got all the hands-on exercises linked to here, this is the URL that you'll connect to. Unless you've got my fortune cookie, you'll have the link right there on there. So I'll kind of be walking around the room. If you have any questions at any time, just call me over. If some of you are just coming in, I'm using this URL here for my app that has all the topics that are covered here today. If you're new, you might want to get one of the fortune cookie fortunes here. Wolf's got some up in the back there, or you could just type in this URL, arcg.is. All right, so the workshop here is, for those of you that have been here, we are working on just getting started with Pro and the SDK. And according to our agenda, we've finished up with the first lesson here. We've looked at add-ins and configurations. And the next part is to look at states and conditions, delegates and doc panes and events and hooking. Seems like a lot to cover. I've got just lessons that you can work on to cover each of these. I don't know that I'm going to talk about each one of them, but I'll get to them as I can. And then after lunch, we're going to cover threading, and then after that, we'll cover projects and geodatabases and adding layers to maps and that sort of thing. When you get to the website here, you'll find how to prepare your machine if you haven't done so already. I know some of you were working on these parts over the last little bit of time. And so we've covered lesson 1. We've looked at creating add-ins and solution configurations. Did anybody get to 1C? Did anybody make a customize there? Customize the configuration? Okay, a couple of you made it. Okay. Well, they're here, so at any time if you want to try these out, they're available, and go ahead and give it a shot. All right, so our next topic here, I want to look at states and conditions. Let me close a couple of these windows here. Okay. And I'm just on one of the Pro guides here. So in the SDK, I just did a search for states and conditions. And we're looking at coding your own states and conditions. Before we do that, let me bring up Pro here and take a look and see what we can find here for states and conditions before we do anything special. Okay. So if I look up here at the clear button, it's grayed out right now because I don't have any features selected on the map. So the clear button is checking for a condition and a state, and if it doesn't find the right one, then it turns itself off automatically. Or if the condition changes, it's going to turn itself back on again. So as soon as I make a selection, well, all of a sudden the clear button is turned on. Another place where states and conditions come into play, if I'm looking at the UI here, I can see the standard tabs. These are 3 tabs that I added during my demos. But right now I don't see anything extra over here. However, if I click on a feature layer over in the contents pane, then all of a sudden I see some extra tabs coming up. So when the conditions are right, these extra tabs will show up. When you have a feature layer selected, these are the tabs that go along with a feature layer. If I select the map, those tabs disappear. If I select the base map, I don't get as many extra tabs over here, these context sensitive tabs. But based on what you're doing in the contents pane or in other panes, there might be buttons and tools and tabs that are appearing or disappearing or enabling or disabling. In the directions here to go about creating your own state or condition, what you're going to do is work in the DAML and in the code behind. So in the DAML, you've got a little bit of work to add a condition to your project through the DAML, but then you've got to have a little bit of code. You've got to have some kind of a method or property out there that's going to toggle the state so that when the state changes, anyone subscribing to that state through a condition will have some effect. They're either going to gray out or appear or disappear or become active. So we've got 3 steps. Define a condition, have some code for the state. So here it says, based on a state or a combination of states. So there's a condition that's going to rely on one or more states. A state is checked on or examined in your code. So you'll have kind of an if-then statement that says, okay, if it's one condition or one set of properties, then the state should be true, otherwise it should be false. So this is code that you're going to have to write. This is the first part here is just in the DAML. The second part down, or the third part, is in the DAML, because you'll make a UI element like a button or a tab, and then on those buttons and tabs, there are conditions. There's a condition attribute. So you could set the condition equal to a condition that you create. Your condition will check on one or more states. It might be that you write the code for the state, or ArcGIS Pro has maybe a few hundred states and conditions that are already programmed. So instead of you having to start from scratch, if you just want the same behavior that the clear button has, you could just borrow its condition. What condition does the clear button use to turn itself on and off? We could find out, and then you wouldn't have to do any programming at all. So first off, I would look to the existing states and conditions that are predefined. And then once I find those, decide, can I just use one that's already been coded? And if so, let me go ahead and use that. Otherwise, then you got to write your own code to check on whatever attributes or properties that would be correct for your button or tab to make its appearance. In the DAML, earlier we talked about the modules and that there's the insert, update, and delete modules. Another area of the DAML at that same level would be conditions. So this is where you could insert your own condition, where you've looked at the states and conditions that are part of ArcGIS Pro and you couldn't find one that you needed to use. You need to have some specialty checking done. So you would insert your own condition. You give it an ID, and for your condition is going to check on some state. Now this is where we need to go to the code, and we need to write some code to toggle this guy here, true or false. All right. Along those same lines, while you're still in the DAML, when you want your condition to be checked, does it need to be checked right away as Pro is getting started? So here, this note says, okay, in your insert module, make sure the auto load is set to true. So you'd have to add the auto load the auto load attribute here. And then your condition will be evaluated when Pro starts up. So that means if your button needs to test, should it be grayed out right away or not? If you want it to have that check right away when Pro starts, you got to add this attribute. All right, now, how do we toggle this state back and forth? That's where you'd go about writing a method. And inside there, you would probably have some more checking going on in here and your business logic to figure out what conditions are right for the button to be on and then what conditions are right for the button to be turned off. So here you would create some kind of a method that changes the state from true to false or activate to deactivate. The third part is pretty easy. The third part is linking the condition to your UI element. So here, if we have a button defined in the DAML, coming on through here, there's a condition attribute that you set. So here on your control, you would set the condition attribute equal to, you could put in your condition here, or you could put in one of the existing ArcGIS Pro conditions. That would mean you would have no other coding to do. You could just find the condition that goes with clear, or there's a condition that checks to make sure that a map is active, that a feature layer is selected. You could find those conditions and just use those here. And then you wouldn't have to do those earlier parts of making your own condition. Just use one that's already there. Do here? Oh, there it is. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to take a look in here. One of the conditions is Esri mapping map pane. And this condition checks to see that a map is active. So I'm going to borrow this condition here. Whoops, let me copy that. Oh, hold on. There's a link in here to all of these conditions. So there's a huge listing here of conditions that are already available to you. The listing is huge, as you can see. I would want to look through here to make sure, I would want to look to see if there's a condition that already covers what I need it to do so I don't have to write the code. So let's say that I have a button and it has to work with a map. And if there's any other anything else, any other panes that are open, right? I don't want to use those other panes. All right, so I've grabbed a condition here that checks to see if a map pane is active. And I'm going to come back over to my code from earlier today. So here's where I created a button, add points. All right, so in this button, I'm going to add that condition. Oh, whoops. Could you have multiple states and then and or the states? Yes, you could. And you'll do that in the exercise part, in the hands-on part. But yeah, up above here, when you insert the condition, you can define multiple states and then use and plus or any mixture of those that you need. You can get as complex as you like. All right, so I got to grab that line here. I thought I copied this, but let me grab it again. All right, and then I'm coming over here to my button, and I'm trying to paste in here. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now I've just added this condition to my button. I'm going to go ahead and give this a test run and see what it looks like when Pro starts up. All right, so I'm opening up my project. And as I look at my tab here, my button is available. There's a map pane that's active. What if I go over the catalog window and now look at how my button is grayed out? So right there I've set a condition. My button is always looking for that condition to be right. When I go to the map, my button automatically becomes alive and ready to use. So that's an example of using an existing condition. What if I want to make my own condition? That's when you add, like right up in here where we had modules in your insert module, you can add conditions using the DAML. And then here I'm adding a condition, I'm giving it a name, and it's going to be looking for this particular state. So for this condition, let me, I've got auto load here set to false, so it's not going to check my condition on startup. I would change this to true if I wanted the condition checked on startup. But for the example state, I've got to now write some code that figures out what is this state and when should it be activated or deactivated. So that's when I'd have to go into the code. And I've got a method over here called toggle state. And this method, its main job is check to see if this current state is there, and then depending upon what that condition is, decide when to deactivate it or when to activate it. In here, you'd probably have more business logic making these decisions, or maybe it's just a one-liner just to check a certain status of something and then activate or deactivate. So you got to have a method, a little bit of a block of code over here that takes whatever you want to call your state. We just called it example state. You could call it whatever you want. And we're just toggling that, either making it active or deactive. All right, and then the third part, back in the DAML, is go to your control. And over here in the control, we're actually calling on that toggle. So we're describing the project, telling it to go over to the module that's in the project, So the syntax here has a couple of parts to it. It has the name of the project for the first part of the syntax, an underscore, and then the name of the module where you're storing the method here, toggle state. You can call the method whatever you want. We called it toggle state. So now for this button, whenever it needs to check on that condition, it always knows, oh, okay, there's a class out there. It's over in the module, and the name of that method is toggle state. You could put it in your own module if you weren't putting it in like the project over here has a designated module, and that's where our toggle state method is located. All right, so with this one, I've got my own code to toggle the state of the condition. And let's see what happens here. Oh, I wanted to look up a little bit. Yeah, so here, whoops, it's my tabs. So I've obviously opened up a different project, and what I've got in this project are a couple of extra tabs. And these tabs have a condition set for them. They have my condition. So they've got this example state condition, which I defined up above. So the two tabs, both of them are checking to see what the condition is, and then they're going to decide whether to appear or not. And it's my button, the clicking of the button, that's changing the state. So let's see here, I've got Pro going. Oops, that is not the right. I thought I started Pro. Oh, there it is. I'm looking in the wrong place here. Okay, let me get Pro going here. Get my project open. All right. So the button that I was just showing you is called toggle state. And when I click on this button, it's the one that's actually changing the state over there. So instead of having some business logic, it's just the clicking of this button that's changing the state. And then those two tabs they're like listening for that condition to change. So keep your eyes over here on the right side. I don't have any tabs over there, but when I do the toggle, then the two extra tabs show up. And then those tabs have buttons and tools located on them. If I want to get rid of those tabs, well then behind the scenes the state changes. Right now my button is taking care of that, and that's when they disappear. This is the same kind of action that's associated with the feature layer. When you click on the feature layer, you get extra tabs. When you click on a different layer or the map, those tabs might disappear. All right, if I look back at the code here, let me get Pro back up here. And I wanted to show those tabs because something interesting is happening. Oh, darn. I closed that map, didn't I? Or was it the one on the... I got too many maps open. There we go. Sorry about that. So here as I toggle the state, the two tabs show up. But then when I go to the tabs, look at how they have some Esri controls on them. As I look at the various tabs, I could have my buttons and tools here, but I've decided to show some of the Esri controls on these tabs. What I wanted to show is in the DAML, how do we make that happen? So here where we're defining those groups, well, I could place my button into those groups, but here I've used Esri buttons and tools. I found out what their ref ID is and then added them into those groups. So when you're building a tab and you're putting together the groups that are going to be on that tab, you might be putting your controls into those groups, But you can also put the Esri controls into those groups. You need to know their names, though. You need to know the names of the controls. To get those names, I like to just do the easiest possible. For me, if you hover in the tooltip that comes up right at the bottom, you'll see the name of the control or the ref ID at the bottom. I don't think I can zoom in here. Oh, and then I did the, I didn't mean to click on it. Okay. So that's one way to get to the ref IDs. If you don't see these IDs, it might be because you don't have them turned on. In the options, customize the ribbon, I've got my show command IDs in the screen tips turned on. If this is off, of course, you're not going to see the ref IDs coming up then. It might be confusing for regular users to see those IDs coming up. They might not know what to do with them. So most of the time you might leave this off, but it's a quick way to find those IDs. Another way to find them, let me come back to Visual Studio and stop debugging. Another way to get a listing of all of those DAML IDs, all of those IDs, is on your project you can right-click, and there's this option here, Pro Generate DAML IDs. This will generate a huge C# file that will have all of the DAML IDs listed in it. So let me do that. It doesn't take very long. So here the C# file got created, and then if I open it up, you'll see that, oh, there's a ton of them in here. So every single one of the IDs is listed in here now. So this is yet another way you can get to the DAML IDs. We could go into the SDK, and there's a whole listing there also where you can look up the DAML IDs. Yes, you could look up the conditions for the clear button itself. How would you do that? I don't know if I want to tell you that. No, I'm just kidding. Let's see. So, great question. Let's take a look here. We're looking at the clear button, and let's say I want to find out what conditions the clear button uses or what states it uses. Because maybe I want to do the same thing. So what we could do here, and I've got these directions written out, so your question is really a good lead-in to the hands-on part. Let me see here. Condition, okay, that's that one. Determining, yeah. So this is just the answer to your question here. Determine the conditions used by any pro command. So for this one, I've got a warning in here that I kind of made a little bit of a joke that I did want to tell you, but I do want to make it clear that I put up some warning flags here, but this is one way you can look up. So here we could go to the... It is. But as long as you're asking, I'm okay showing it. So here, if we go to where the software is installed in the bin, this is a really good point for me to bring up so we can take a look in there, and then it'll answer the other question about using and or. So here, I'm going to go to this folder here. I'm going to go one level up, copy, and paste here. Whoops. I thought I copied in. Oh, what is it doing there? It's not giving me the whole thing. Okay, so I'll just navigate over there. All right, let me go to the C drive and program files. Over to ArcGIS. We're going to go to Pro and the bin and the extensions. And I want to go to the mapping. All right, and one of the things you'll see here, I like to bring this up because take a look at each of these folders here. Let me zoom in. And ignore that it uses the word extension here. It's almost as if each one of these is its own little mini add-in. So when I go to any of these folders and I open it up, you can even tell by their naming that they're logical groups of functionality. So let me go to mapping. And in here, you'll see some of the DLLs. Your add-ins have DLLs. There's also some XML, and there's also the DAML. The DAML contains the user interface description. So here, this is the DAML that goes along with the mapping functionality for Pro. Oh, whoops. I meant to, let me cancel that. I meant to right-click and open it with Notepad. So here, we're kind of looking under the hood now, and this is the DAML for all the mapping functionality. And if we look at it, we'll see, okay, hold on now, let me scroll down a little bit. Got some stuff going on here that I'm just going to bypass for now. Okay. And we get down to the modules area, and then here's the insert module. And here we can find all the functions, all the tabs that are mapping related and how they get inserted. So this is really the description for the Pro UI of lots of the mapping functionality. All right, I'm just going to do a Control F. I'm going to look up conditions. All right, so here we can see there's a tab, the Esri Mapping Table tab, and it has a certain condition. Well, as we keep scrolling through here, I could keep finding conditions. There's probably too many of them to search on. But here's the conditions area. So in the listing here would be all of the conditions. And we could see that, oh, okay, here's a condition about subtypes. It has a state. It's using not as opposed to and or. If I scroll down in here, we'll start to see some that might use a combination of and not. So here's one that happens to use some nots and an and. And if I scroll down a little bit further, we'll start to see just a variety of conditions that are checking on states and then combining and or and not to check on those states. Let's see. So if I wanted the selection button, I'm going to do an Alt F here. Let me get my find back. Esri mapping. Okay, so here I'm finding the clear selection button. It looks like it's part of a group. Let me find the next occurrence. Okay. Okay, got it. So here's the clear selection button, and it looks like one of the conditions it checks for is the map pane active? This may not be exactly the same clear select that I'm thinking about. Let's see here, let me try one more. Oh, what happened to my clear selection? Okay. Got a typo in here. Clear selection. Okay. So I could keep going through here and find there might be several buttons that had the same keyword inside there. So I might have to keep looking through here to find the exact button and the exact condition that I want to check for. But once I find that condition, if I'm making my own controls, I could reuse that condition. I want to make sure not to save or change this file at all, because if I do, the mapping functionality might get messed up in Pro. Are they read-only? I had not checked, but I don't want to change them no matter what. So I want to get out of there. Okay. So for now, it looks like we're just after 11 o'clock here. We are in lesson 2. And what I'd like to do is send you off to try some of these exercises here. They're not very long, but the first one does the state and condition, the mapping. Then you grab one of the existing tools or buttons and find its condition. And we go a little bit further in here. I don't have enough time to talk about some of these things, but a delegate command means, let's say you make your own doc pane. Let me do that here. Let me go ahead and let me go to Visual Studio. I'm going to just go to my states and conditions here. And what do I have in here right now? I don't have a doc pane. Let me insert a doc pane. So here I'm going to do an add new item and go to the ArcGIS items in here. And just like I've added new buttons, I'm going to add a new doc pane. When I add a doc pane, a couple of things happened over here in the project. I got a little bit more than I bargained for. So part of the doc pane, I got the XAML that goes along with it because it's a user control, a WPF control. And then I've got its C# file behind the scenes. So we've got we're using a certain style of Microsoft programming, the MVVM pattern. So sometimes they call it the model view model technique. And with doc panes, this is a great example of when the MVVM pattern is just used. We don't really say, hey, do you want to use MVVM or not? We just go ahead and use it, where you get a user control, that's the viewing part. That's the user interface part. And then you get the view model, that's where your business logic goes, that's where your code goes. And over here, model is optional in the pattern. But model would help us to get to data in a database or a JSON or XML or wherever you might have data stored. You would use the model to make those connections. So we've separated the three pieces, the user interface, the data, and the business logic. And we're just following that pattern. So here, the doc pane, it has this component here, the XAML component. And if we take a look at it, it's just a WPF control that you can add more controls onto. Right now it's empty, but I could grab a button over here, and I could grab maybe a text box and a label. And so I would get to design this WPF control. This is going to be my doc pane that opens up. In the doc pane, I might ask my user for some information like a username and password, or I might let the user set some properties up here. There might be some buttons that the user clicks on to make something happen. Or maybe the button is really a tool. So when the user clicks it, they have to go over to the map and they have to draw something over here on the map. You can design your own doc pane from the ground up and decide what information do you need to get from your user and what controls do they need to operate on. Maybe there's some data that you're showing them in here and it's reading and writing a database somewhere or an XML or a JSON somewhere else. So you're giving your user a view on that data. So now, what if you wanted to call here, what if you wanted to call one of the Esri controls? You could go to this button and like double click on it to get to its code behind and go to its click event. And then you could write your own logic in here for the clicking of the button. However, you could also call on some of the Esri controls. So if you wanted to do maybe the add layer, or we could look at the Pro UI here and decide, oh, maybe there's some buttons that you want to add. You don't want to add this button to your pane. You just want that functionality. So when we talk about delegates, let me come to our course materials here. When we talk about a delegate command and implementing a delegate, let's see here. Oh, the module, okay. Oh, I think I used the wrong term here. I'm sorry. How did I get that mixed up? Delegate and the hooking. So the hooking part means you could hook in a pro command so that when I click one of those WPF buttons, it hooks in one of the commands from ArcGIS and lets me use one of those commands. The command could be a button or it could be a tool. So as your user is working along, by the way, the contents over here, this is a pane, and the catalog window is a pane. So when I'm talking about doc panes, it's one of these that you could design your own doc pane. And within that doc pane, you get to decide what it looks like and what functionality it has. It could have all of your own functionality, but potentially, like if you want to get your user to draw on the map, you might find out, well, what tool can I use to make that happen? Maybe the select tool. Maybe you want your user to be able to select without having to come up here to hit the select tool and then come over to the map and do the selection. Potentially, you could have your own WPF control that does select, and it hooks in the Pro Select button. So when your user clicks here and they come over to the map, they're just using the select button. All right, so for now, I'm going to send you off to work on these exercises here. It's about 1:15. We've got till, I don't know when lunch starts. It might start in about 15 minutes, but you could work for a little while, then take lunch, and then maybe come back from the lunch and keep working. And then at, let's check our timing here, at 1 o'clock we'll start up on the threading and asynchronous programming and using queued task. All right, so for now, you've got some time to work on the lesson 2 exercises here. All right, I'm going to turn my microphone off, and as we did last time, just call us over if you have any questions. We're getting ready to look at Pro's threading model to figure out how does this threading system work. Well, the good news is a lot of stuff is going to happen behind the scenes, so you're not going to have to do a lot of thread management. But you'll have to follow a pattern so that your code runs where it's supposed to run. So there's a little bit of thread management, but once you see the pattern, and you'll constantly follow the same pattern. So it won't be a different pattern each time, but there's a threading pattern to follow where we use Esri's queued task. All right, so we got to figure out what this threading means. I've got a little bit of description here with some graphics, and we hear how ArcGIS Pro is different than desktop because, oh, it's multi-threaded. What does that mean, multi-threaded? Well, with Pro, there are several processes that can run simultaneously or asynchronously. But when they run, we have to make sure that they don't lock up the user interface. So in my graphic here, let me zoom in a little bit. What my graphic here is representing, this is like the main user interface thread. Sometimes we call it the main UI thread. So as you're writing some code, I think we've been using the main UI thread so far. We haven't gone to any background threads yet. One of the goals with Pro is that it doesn't lock your user from doing anything. Your user should have a responsive interface the whole time. With ArcMap, sometimes you'll run a tool or you'll do something with ArcMap and then it grays out and you'll get ArcMap unresponsive, or you'll get some message where you can't do anything. The UI in ArcMap grays out a little bit and you can't click any buttons, you can't interact with the map. With Pro, you should be able to continuously interact with the product. So the app needs to remain responsive. On the programming side then, when you write the code for your business logic, you'll need to run your code in a background thread. So your code can't run on the main UI. It has to run in a background on a background thread. In the threading system, there's a couple of terms I'm going to throw out here. So I think I've got them written down, but I'll write them down again. So there's the main UI thread. That's where the user interface things are going on. Windows are opening and a user might be clicking a button. And those things can happen on the main UI because they don't lock it. However, if you want to run something like a buffer or a union or some process that's going to take a while, that process needs to run on a background thread. We have a term for that. We call it the MCT, or the main SIM thread. And SIM is for CIM, for Cartographic Information Model. So this is something that's been created by Esri to handle the background processing, to handle the threading. So when we write the code, we're not really going to have to be thinking about, well, how many threads do I have? And how are those threads being managed? And we just won't have to deal with that. So it's handled behind the scenes through the main Cartographic Information Model thread. And this has been built for us so that we don't have to worry about managing all the threads that might be happening behind the scenes. So if I do a buffer, the buffer tool can go off and run and do its work. And yeah, it's going to come back with a result sooner or later. But I could also do some other tool like a select. And then it could go off and do its work. Both of those processes will run in the background on the main SIM thread. They're going to run asynchronously. So the process gets sent off. Our user can continue interacting with the user interface, and they don't have to wait for the buffer to finish or for the select to finish. The user can stay over here and they're zooming and panning, and maybe they're clicking on some other buttons over here, and they have that responsiveness. They're not stalled in any way.
If you were doing the select and then buffering what you selected, how is it going to wait?
Aha, good question. So what if I do a buffer and the buffer goes off to run and I want to do a select, but it needs the buffer. So how do I control the threading? How do I, if I just call buffer, it's going to go off and run. And if my next line of code does a select, it's going to go and run, and it might not have the result that it needs to finish. So I could either have a failure or some unexpected results. Part of this model, and actually coming from the Microsoft side too, there's a way for us to tell this process to run and wait. So our code is almost paused here. The UI isn't paused, but our code is paused. So it's going to wait for the result to come back, and then it'll go on to do the next operation. So that's a programming technique that you would have to follow. You'd have to know which ones to wait for, and then decide, oh yeah, I do want to wait for this one. You don't have to wait every time, but you can ask it to wait. You might think waiting is going to lock your user interface up, but the waiting doesn't. It just holds your code up to wait for the response to come back. All right, so then we get into some of this terminology that sometimes they call them coarse-grained methods or fine-grained methods. There's two kinds of methods. And if it's coarse-grained, it's an asynchronous method. If it's fine-grained, then it's a synchronous method. The way that you tell the difference between the two, when you're looking in the help system and you look up a class and you find out what kind of methods it has, the asynchronous ones will have async appended on their name. The ones that don't have async are not coarse-grained, they're fine-grained methods, and they're going to run synchronously. So I'm going to jump over to the help system here. I don't know if I have the SDK page linked here, but I'll get to it. There we go, SDK. Let's just take a look at the API and look at some classes and their properties and methods. All right, so I'm going to go to the API. The map class seems to be a real popular one, so I'm just going to search through the API here. Whoop, what happened? All right, I got the API. I want to do a search. Oh, it's just a little slow for me right now. It's spinning away. All right, so I'm going to search for the map class. And over on the right side, I can see a couple of results coming back that use the keyword map. And luckily, the map class came up pretty high. So here I'm going to go to the map class. And as I look at the map class, I can see the map has a lot of connected items here that I could also examine. Maps have a spatial reference. They have some geographic and projected coordinate system associated with them. But I'm looking for the methods, so I'm going to scroll down a little bit. Or I'm going to scroll down a lot. And I'm going to look for the map members down here at the bottom. So that'll take me to the map's properties and methods. All right, and then here are the public methods for the map class. And as we look at them, do you see any that are asynchronous? Okay, so one of them is asynchronous, the others are not. So this is going to help us to distinguish what pattern to follow. Is the method asynchronous? That means it's already designed to run in the background. So with this one, getZ from surface async, I could run this one right in my regular code. I don't have to do anything special to run this operation. It's going to just run asynchronously, and it's going to go to the background by itself. We don't need to do anything. However, with these others, they don't have the async keyword. So we would call these synchronous methods, or You might call them fine-grained methods. Most of the methods fall into this category. So every once in a while, you're going to come across some asynchronous methods. All the rest are going to be synchronous. Well, let's focus here on a synchronous method. All right, I'm going to grab just a block of code here with a synchronous method in it, already defined. Wait a minute, did it? Well, I surely can't grab this code very easily. Is it going to? Okay. Let me come on over here. Let me go to, what do I have here? I've got I'm going to create a new button. So let me go ahead and start there. I'm going to add a new button to this project. Okay, and then in the click event of this button, I'm going to add, oh gosh, that didn't come in very nicely. I'm going to add this bit of asynchronous code in here. Boy, that doesn't look good. It's probably it'll work okay. Why did it do that? I guess I have carriage returns in that PDF file. So here I'm using Geoprocessing, and I'm using the execute tool async method. So with this method, you can run any of the tools in the toolbox. How many tools are there in the toolbox? Lots of them. Anybody throw out a number? $850? Something like that. I don't know exactly, but there's a lot of tools in the toolbox. So within your code, if you want to run any one of those tools, this is the method to use. It's an asynchronous method. So select layer by attribute tool is going to run in the background automatically. And here I'm doing the select layer by attribute. I'm telling it, go to the parcels layer, make a new selection, and then use this SQL query here, this where clause, and find this address for me. All right, so let's run the code and just see what happens. All right, we'll get Pro started here. Well, that's going. I'm going to go to a different location. SDK, okay. All right, I got to keep that off to the side here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open this project. There's a map in here that has Portland, Oregon parcels. For some reason, my Pro has slowed up a bit. All right, so here I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit on the map. Maybe I'll change the color here so it's not too purple. Okay, all right, and then now I'm going to go ahead and run that tool, or that button. Oh boy, where'd my button go? Well, that certainly isn't it. Okay, I'm in the map, I'm in the add-in tab. I don't see the button that I just created. Maybe it's failing because of my code here. All right, hold on now. Let's see. Where is that button? Here's button 1. It's right there. Let me take a look at the DAML and the config.daml, and let's see where button number 1 is here. Oh gosh. Oh brother. Where'd it go? Wait a minute, do I have, I don't have, no. Okay. I saw myself add that button in there, and here's the code for the button. Anybody see if I did anything strange, or besides how the code came in here? All right, let me scrap this one then. Okay, I'm going to quickly throw together a second. Okay, let's see here. I was using this one earlier. This is my configuration. Let me get rid of that. All right, I'm just going to throw everything out and start from scratch. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened with my button. I thought I added it to the project. It might be in there, but I'm just too nervous and don't want to goof around and look for it. So I'll just create a new add-in. All right, as I create the new add-in, I'll add a button. I'll put my code back in there. Click on the project, add item, add a new item, add a new button. I see the button in there. I'm going to go to the DAML, and I see the button in here, button 1. It's going into group 1. I'm happy. All right, let's go to the code. I'm going to go to a different place now to grab my code. Instead of from the PDF file, I'm not copying very well from there. So I'm going to grab it from here. I've got an extra Word document on the side. Okay. Go to the coarse grained. Here we go. Okay. All right, I got the code here. All right, I think I'm back on track again. This will look a little bit better. So it's on the geoprocessing object, asynchronously run select layer by attribute. I've got to resolve geoprocessing. It shows up as red. So I need a using statement. And when I do the drop down here, we can see that, oh, okay, ArcGIS Desktop Core Geoprocessing has the geoprocessing class in it. So I'll resolve it. That using statement will get added in up here, and we're ready to go. All right, let's cross our fingers and hope this one works. I have a layer called parcels, and it's from Portland, Oregon, and it just has parcels in it. So in the code here, let me zoom back in here. Here, there's got to be a parcels layer on the map, and that's what I'm using as a starting point, parcels. All right, so let me get my map open back up here. Okay. Not sure why my Pro is going a little slower. All right, yeah, so here I'm over in Portland, Oregon. I got parcels of land over here. Here's my button over here. Button 1 is now showing up. I'll click on button 1. And it selected this parcel of land over here. Let me clear that. Let me do a clear. Go back to the add-in. I'm going to click and then zoom in right away. Oh, it went too fast. I was going to try to zoom in on the map while the tool was running, but it goes too fast now. All right, so I've run an asynchronous method. And the thing here is I didn't have to do anything special. Like I talk about this special pattern of programming, when you have methods that are already asynchronous, you're good to go. You don't have to do anything special. Just call on them and they're automatically going to run in the background. Now the next question that came up was, hey, wait a minute. What if I put another method in there? Like here, I'm going to add zoom to selected async. So select the feature on the map and then zoom in on it. I'm going to resolve map view and get its using statement in there. And this is where we're going to get something weird, because this tool is going to run asynchronously on its own thread. But then I'm calling this method. It's also asynchronous. It's going to run on its own thread. The two threads are separate. They don't know about each other. So when I run, let me run the project again here, just so that we can confirm the behavior. When I run the tool, it's it's not going to be able to do both of these things. All right, so here I'm going to go ahead and click on the tool. Sorry, a button. And you can see that the parcel was selected, but the zoom went off and ran and finished before the selection was made. So there was nothing to zoom in on. What if I click the button again? What's going to happen? It'll do the zoom because now there's something selected. So it will select again, but zoom will see that, oh, this one's selected, I'm going to zoom in on it. So it now zooms in. Well, that's not good behavior. We're one step behind there. So what I need to do now is take advantage of weighting. And to do that, we're going to use a Microsoft technique. So I'm going to add a couple of keywords in here. Okay, and I'll zoom in here so you can see what I just did. I added async and await. So this is following a Microsoft pattern, and part of the pattern is using this async keyword in the click event. By doing that, we're saying, okay, within here, I might be calling on some asynchronous processes, and I need to wait for some of them to finish. So there's a corresponding keyword, await. And now here we're saying go ahead and run this tool, but pause here. Wait till the tool finishes, then go on and do the next asynchronous process. All right, so now, uh-oh, there's the green underline. Let me zoom in here. The green underline is telling us, I don't know if you'll be able to see the message here. Can I zoom in? Oh, I can. So here it says, this call is not awaited. So we're seeing green. It's not red. It's not blue. It's green. So it's more of a, hey, are you sure you want to do this? It's expecting us to also use the await keyword here too. But does it make sense to await here? There's nothing else after it. Yeah, so why should we wait? We don't need to wait because there's nothing. But if there were more lines of code here, probably you might want to await it. It's up to you though, if you want to use await or not. The green is just a warning saying it's there, use it if you need to. All right, so now we're running again here. And this time when I use the button, it should do both of these in sequence. So it'll do the query and make the selection on one thread and wait till that's finished, and then zoom runs on its own thread. All right, so here I'm going to go ahead to the add-in and click on the button. I'm just clicking off to the side here so you can see that I'm still using the user interface over here, even though all those asynchronous calls were happening. So the user interface is always responsive, even though we're running some other methods. But they're running asynchronously, they're running on their own threads, and I haven't really had to do anything to manage them yet. It's pretty straightforward. All right, so now this is where it gets interesting. When I was showing you the help system, there are more synchronous methods. Most of the methods are synchronous. And for those, we're going to have to follow a slightly different pattern because we need our code to run in the background. So we're going to have to make our own asynchronous method. Do you do that for those ArcGIS programmers out there? Do you make your own functions or your own... You don't make your own functions or your Your own methods, your own... Nope. You just write your ArcObjects code and you call on it? You never thought about packaging up a block of code and then calling that code when you need it?
No. Well, yeah, I know that.
Okay.
But I never used that.
Okay.
You're talking about like the functions in classes?
Yeah, like your own functions and classes. Ah, okay. 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 So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to write our own methods, our own functions, our own methods, and then after writing those methods, then call on those methods. So first of all, we'll just kind of ease into it without, it's optional. You don't have to write your own method, but it could be to your advantage to write your own methods. Let me cancel out here. And I'm going to grab a little bit of code here off to the side. I need just a little bit of code here. All right, so I want to grab a different block of code. All right, and then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to delete all the code that I had that had the asynchronous methods in it. Okay. All right, I got to do a little bit of a couple of using statements are needed here. Good. Okay, let me zoom in so you can see what I'm doing here. So I've switched over. I'm now going to use the select method and the zoom to selected method. They don't have async in them. They don't have the keyword in there. So these are synchronous methods. I'm really doing the same thing. I'm using the same query. I'm finding the parcel layer. So I've got the same layer, same parcels layer. I'm building a query filter. And then doing a select with the new selection as opposed to add to or remove from. All right, so now let's see what happens here. What if I try to run this code? What do you think is going to happen if I try to run the code? Any thoughts?
Well, I've come across errors before where it would say you can't write it on this web, but I'm not sure.
Okay, good. Okay, let me try to run it and let's see what happens. So we get a failure, we get an error message, and it tells us we're running this thing on the wrong thread. So when I write the code in this way, there's no asynchronous processing at all. It thinks that I want to try to run this code on the main UI thread. I'm not allowed to do that. And that's what it's telling me here, that I need to make a thread and put this code out on its own thread. Okay. And you might have seen me bringing up the help in the background here. When you look in the help system, so here I'm looking at all the methods on the map class. And if I look just a little bit on all their descriptions, it says, oh gosh, you got to call these on the main sim thread. You can't call them from the UI thread. They're not going to work. So that's the error message is backing this up. The error messages would be nice if it says, hey, why don't you just use queued task and that'll help you out. But as you look here, all of these, they're all synchronous methods and they all need to run in the background. In order to do that, we have to create something called a queued task. So that's what I'm going to do next. All right, I'm going to grab a little bit of code in the background here. Okay. Copy that and bring it right on in here. I need to get just a little bit more here to finish off that task, and then I'll explain it. All right, so what did I do here? Tap that in there, just kind of clean things up a little bit. Oh, yes, okay. All right, I'm going to go to queued task and make sure that I'm getting it from the right place, resolve it. Async, okay, notice my line is turning green because I have async, so I can await this if I need to. That'll get rid of all that green stuff. Oops, I thought I resolved queued task. What am I missing? Oh, I'm missing a return. Down here, okay. What was that? Did I miss that? Task, wait. I think I had something else in place there. Okay. Is that what I'm missing? All right, I'm not going to worry about that right now. But here, queued task, oh, no, that looks okay. Queued task comes from Esri, but it's based on Microsoft's, they call it the TAP model. It's a task-based programming technique. So with task, with a queued task is going to take all of the code here and run it in the background. So it's going to take care of that background processing for us. Any code you write that has synchronous methods in it, like these two, they need to be run within a queued task. So that's what the error message was saying. Hey, you're running this on the wrong thread. You need to run it using queued task.
So you're saying every synchronous method has to be run that way?
If you have synchronous methods, they need to be packaged in a queued task so that they can run in the background. They need to run in the background and not on the main UI thread.
When I was going through some of the other classes, they kept using the word lambda when I saw this. Does that make sense to you?
Okay.
I didn't understand what they meant. Oh, that's just that symbol.
That symbol means, it's kind of like an anonymous function. It's like, hey, this is my function here, and I want to call this function, I want this code to run in the background. So the lambda helps us to organize the code into like an anonymous function so that it...
Lambda is just the name of that specific...
That symbol, yeah.
Okay.
I took a session on the architecture, and it kind of stuff, I think I understand what it's kind of doing. It's kind of, everything within that queue task run is run in order on one thread, but it's a different thread than the UI thread. So you say, get off the UI thread, now go, you're on one thread, now just run like you would have done it in the past. Is that correct?
Run it on its own thread.
Yeah, it's on one, it's on, all the stuff that's together is on one thread, run in sequential order. It's not multi-threaded there, or...
It could be if you have asynchronous methods inside there, which would be kind of weird to have an asynchronous method calling on other asynchronous methods. That's probably not a good style. It's possible, but not the best programming style.
So basically you're saying, run this regularly, but just get it off the UI thread.
Right, yes. You have to run it in the background. You have to run it on its own thread. This is the pattern we follow to run code on its own thread.
I think the lesson was don't fire up a bunch of different asynchronous threads.
That might be bad also.
Yes, try to keep most of that like all on one thread, but just not on the UI thread.
Yes, let me just bring up an example here. Here we go. Let me go to my threading model picture. So, Yeah, so here we're basing our work off of the Microsoft task pattern, which is this task-based asynchronous programming. So Microsoft, they have something over here, it's called system.task, and the Esri queued task is built off of Microsoft's system.task. So it's really following the same idea, but the whole point of it is making it easy for us to do the multi-threading. The second part of that is, if you make an add-in and somebody else makes an add-in and I make an add-in and another person gets all three of our add-ins on the same machine, well, if we've done our programming right, all of us are making threads and we're not going to bump into each other and have trouble. Those threads are managed, even though one user might be pulling in lots of add-ins from different resources and using that variety of add-ins. So by following the multi-threaded pattern, that guarantees that none of us will lock up the user interface. We all have to follow the same pattern. Everybody that makes an add-in has to use queued task to call on their synchronous methods. Oh, so now to the question here about, let me just add to my diagram here. I'm going to put another one of these over here, a smaller one. All right, so that's the main UI. Okay, M1, M2, and M3. So earlier, I was showing you a couple of asynchronous calls where I did a select, and then I did a zoom, and I could go on to do something else after that. But what's happening here is, for the main UI, we're calling off and starting up a thread and doing processing on that thread. Then we come back to the main UI. Then we go back to make another thread to run in the background. Come back to the main UI. Then go make another thread and run in the background, and then come back to the main UI. That back and forth takes a little bit of time to make those threads and manage them and get the results back. So with queued task, let me just do I don't want to confuse it, but I'm just going to abbreviate here, QT for queued task. And with a queued task, we can organize the methods that are going to run and use synchronous methods. So here, we're just going off into the background once, and we can have all of our methods run one thread and then come back with the results. So it's a little bit more efficient to organize your work using queued task and the synchronous methods and just have one that does everything in the background on one thread and then comes back with the final result. So this back and forth here, you can have too much of that and too many threads. They're all different threads that would get created and managed, and there's a bit of overhead associated with that. That's one of the reasons why most of the methods are synchronous. They are that way so that you can carry this type of action out. So you can follow this pattern of making your own queued task, using as many methods as you need to, and putting them all onto one thread and having them run together.
What's the main reason for calling something asynchronous? Like, the hopper-DSR decide these are the ones that are going to be asynchronous. What's the main consideration there?
Okay, so you're asking about the methods and how most of them are synchronous, but some of them are not.
Yeah, why is it an advantage for those particular ones to be asynchronous?
So that's a great question. Oh, I've already got those removed. So some of the methods are asynchronous for convenience. So the Esri developers that were building all the methods, somehow they got together and decided, oh, you know what, this would probably be better as an asynchronous method. Why don't I just package it up and make an asynchronous method out of it? And then in other cases, they have pairs where there's a synchronous and an asynchronous. They've got the same name, but one of them runs synchronously and one has the async suffix on it, and it runs in the background without you having to do any queued task.
Right. So they've done all this stuff in the.
So the Esri developers that built the API, they've put the methods together for you. And you're going to see those methods, most of them synchronous, and with most of them, you'll have to build your own queued task. I just need a minute here. What did I have that in there? Feels like I'm missing something. No, that's Microsoft, okay. Just need to check my code here. What did I had something else at the end. Did I pick the wrong? Queued task. Okay. I'm doing something wrong here, but I'm not sure what. I'm trying to resolve queued task, and it looks like it resolved. All right, if I can't figure it out, I'm just going to go on to the next bit here. New code, okay, wrap it in the queued task. Got it. Did I add in or delete something here? Okay, I'm not sure what I've got incorrect here. Sometimes I'll have an extra or a missing closing or curly bracket or something. I can't tell. Okay. Fine, great. Okay, now I want to package this up. Asynchronous. Okay, here we go. All right, so what I'm going to do next, let me come back to the code here and take a look here. All right, so when you build a queued task, the code in the queued task is going to run in the background. You don't have to worry about the threading. It's automatically happening because you're using queued task. An interesting pattern, though, instead of just building the queued task over here in the click event, more commonly what I might do is build some functions. Oh, there was something. Okay, something weird is happening here. Why is that still red? Oh, maybe because I got the async in here. Like that? I wanted to get rid of all the code inside the click event. I thought I got rid of it all, but it's like still remembering queued task. Thank you. Yes. I wonder if that would have helped me earlier. You did. Okay. All right, so I've cleaned. Let me do a build. All right, I'm doing the build, and it doesn't seem to throw anything. All right, let's see what happens here. I'll just keep going. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make my own asynchronous method. So I'm going to go here. You could make a new module, or you might make several modules, And within those modules, you might have several asynchronous methods that you create yourself. And then you can call on those when you need them. When you build your own asynchronous method, you're going to have all the queued task stuff inside there, but you'll have a name for your method, so you could call it, you could pass values into it, and so it could return values back out of that method. So it's like building a function or a collection of functions that you could call on anytime you need them. So here, I'm just going to go into the module. I'm going to grab a little bit of code that I've got here behind the scenes. And let's see if this helps here. So I'm going to copy this in. And I'm just coming over to the module. I'm going to paste in a new method over here. You could call this method anything you want. It's recommended that you put the async keyword at the end so that you know for sure this is an asynchronous method. So here, I'm just building my own asynchronous method. It's based on Microsoft's task from system.task. So it's going to return task. All right, so now here in the queued task, let me see if I can finally get this to resolve. Okay, and let me grab another bit of code here. All right, I've got a return in here, so that might be helpful. All right, I got a little resolving to do. Let me get that done. Query filter. All right, so now I've got my own method. Inside the method, I've got a queued task. In the queued task, there's the lambda here, or anonymous function that's going to run. And inside here, I'm doing a select and zoom to selected. These are synchronous methods. They don't have the async keyword. Okay. Oh, now I need a way for this method to run. So I'm going to come on back to my button, to its click event, and let me add a couple of lines in here to call on my method. All right, let me copy that. And let's see if this works here. All right, so what I'm hoping to do here is call on my asynchronous method. It's over in module 1. I want to await it, so I'll need to have the async keyword up here. All right, I'll need to resolve the message box. I'll just use the system Windows message box. All right, so when I call on my function, it's going to run asynchronously because it's using queued task. It'll do its work. It's going to come back with a count so that I can find out how many items were selected, and then I just have a message box that pops up that information. I don't know if this is going to work right away, but I'm going to give it a shot and see if it works. All right, I'm getting my demo project open. Probably time for me to make a new project. I think this one's got too much stuff in it. All right, there's Portland. Here's the button. Crossing my fingers. Zoom to the selected feature. And then I get a count telling me how many features got selected. So when we started, I ran the selection and the zoom with asynchronous methods. Those two asynchronous methods, it just so happens they have corresponding synchronous versions of themselves. It was more efficient for me to call the synchronous version, but I had to wrap them in queued task. And then if you're using queued task, it's to your advantage to build your own asynchronous functions, to build a collection of these functions, so that you could call on them anytime you need them. So here from the button, I'm calling my own asynchronous function, or asynchronous method. So while you're, oh, go ahead.
So if you're doing the one where you're using the lambda
So here I'm building a
Yeah.
queued task.
Oh, okay, but when you build the function, you have to have a return a task.
The function's got to return something, and up above here, I'm saying that I'm going to return an integer out of this task.
The whole thing, okay.
That tells you what the return type is.
So it tells us that, okay, return count.
Oh, what I'm saying is, okay, so now you're calling a function from somewhere, but when that was built right in,
Yes.
you didn't have the task.
I was missing the count. I was missing the return count, and that might have been it.
Oh, no, I'm just talking as a pattern. I thought you just had the queued task run in there without having it. Before you made it a separate function, when it was running just inline into the.
I was just running queue task all by itself. I was not returning the results of the queued task.
Okay.
Yes.
So the way you do it is you just use.
Copy.
So if you went back and you just.
Let's see if I can replace this here.
It's a syntax thing. So you can get it in your back. Queue task run. You don't have to have it.
There, it finally resolved. So this should work too.
You just say run. You don't need a return from it.
Exactly.
Okay.
I'm sorry, one more time, to get rid of that green stuff, what did you do again? All those green lines.
Okay, hold on a moment. Let's make sure that this does run. So it should come up with the same results, I would think, except instead of running it, instead of making an official asynchronous method out of it, I'm just running queued task in the click event. All right, so there's the add-in. Queued task is running inside the click event, but it is, because it's in a queued task, it's going off onto that background, making a thread, and doing its work in the background. But it's to your advantage to build these asynchronous functions instead of just putting queued task blocks.
It's just a matter of syntax.
Okay. All right, and then the green stuff, because I'm using async up here, it's telling me with the green that if you want to, you can await.
Oh, yeah, I'll wait.
You can wait for this one to run. You don't have to await it, but it's to your advantage to await. All right.
So what I hear you saying, if you create your own modules of your own functions, you're going to be creating asynchronous ones.
Yes, make asynchronous functions for yourself.
The advantage of it, but you would not have to make them asynchronous. If you wrote your own modules with functions, they wouldn't have to be asynchronous, but there's an advantage to making them asynchronous.
They need to be asynchronous because they need to run in the background.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay.
So make your own functions, wrap the code in a queued task so that they do run in the background on their own thread. And then it's the queued task that makes that thread, that takes them into the background and manages the thread that they're going to run on. All right. So for now, we've got some hands-on time here. In the hands-on time, the hands-on part kind of goes along with my demo here. So you can try out making a coarse grain method, running a fine grain method, and then making your own asynchronous utility method. The last part here, I just threw it in there. We really haven't seen any VB. I don't know if anybody using VB? Couple. So if you want to look at the VB version, it's here. Very similar on the VB or the C# side, but somebody asked me a while ago, how do you do it in VB? And this is just looking at the two compared. I think I just used the Telerik utility to convert one from the other. And so the VB is up on the top and the C# is down on the bottom. But the async is a little bit different in VB. You'll figure it out. You'll see that.
I have a question about the coarse grain and fine grain. The coarse grain, they're the async.
Yes.
So why do they need that other terminology, coarse grain, fine
It mixes me up too.
It's like you already got it. It's synchronous, asynchronous. Why do you have to confuse the two?
Yeah, I'm with you.
And, fine grain, like they were saying, ArcGIS was fine grain because it had a lot of detail. They had a lot of.
Yeah, like how many methods are in ArcGIS? Like 10,000 or something like
I
that?
thought it was 30,000.
30,000. Yeah, just.
Think of it as fine grained because they're usually fine grouped into one asynchronous method.
But could you do the threading in ArcGIS? Could you make your own threads?
Yeah, I never had to do that.
It's not multi-threaded.
You probably could, but you have to really know what you're doing.
Yeah, I don't know if that was an easy process. All right, so we'll take some. What's that?
You mean easy like this?
Easy as this? Yeah, how easy could it be? I wanted to get started just by looking at Pro and getting an idea of what some of the pieces look like on the Pro side before we start talking about them on the programming side. So the first set of components to start talking about is in the catalog window. When you look in the catalog window, you can see that, oh yeah, I can connect to my project. And then what are these things here? What would you call these things in there? Are they tabs? Folders that you can expand? Folders. They look like folders. It's like a tree view kind of a thing. Okay. We call them items. So just to keep it simple, at the top level, they're called project items. So a project is composed of items, and some projects might have more or less of these items, depending upon what you're building. But whenever you make a project, you always get a toolbox and a geodatabase to go with it, unless you've changed your basic settings. You can go to the backstage and go to the options, and you can turn some of these on and off so that you don't always get a geodatabase or always a toolbox. But yeah, that's the out-of-the-box setting. You get these project items, and if you build geocoding locators, you might get the locators item. You might, like right now I don't have any layouts, so I don't have the layout project item, and I don't have any layouts here in this project. So on the user side, a user might go and insert a layout and pick from one of the page sizes. And then over in the project, there's now a layout item, a project item that stores the layouts or keeps track of the layouts. Some of the things you might do here would be get an existing map and open that map. Or you might be creating new maps with your code or new layouts with your code. So on the programming side, we start with the project, and there's sort of a hierarchy where you can go to a project, get to the project items, find an item in one of the different collections, and then do something like get the map item, and then put the map into a pane over here. Or sorry, into a view. So here there's a map view, I've got a layout view. It looks like I've got two map views because I have the same map displayed twice here. I'll close up one of those. All right, another area that you might be interested in connecting to is a portal. So when a user goes to portal here, they have selected over here their content. So the user would be able to see content as they're logged into their own portal. This would be their content stored at that portal location. So this is all my content here. If I belong to groups, then I can go to the next one and I can find out what groups I belong to. So here you can see all of the groups I'm part of. I could go into any of these and see if there are any items inside there that I might want to open up and work with. On the programming side, you might want to find out what groups I belong to. And then, if appropriate, open up a map that is part of one of these groups. Or show me controls that I can use to do things to maps in one of these groups based on my group membership. The open cloud over here is just any content stored at ArcGIS Online. So if I did a search here for National Weather Service, NextRad, I'm just looking up for some weather data. All right, so I get a whole bunch of choices here. These are all shared by who knows who at ArcGIS Online. Some of them might be official organizations that are sharing their work. I'd want to look into that before using their data, but yeah, so here I'm finding some weather data. I like this one here, the WMS. It's from National Weather Service, and it's hosted by Iowa State University. Oh, one of the things that I wanted to show just about Pro is if you're looking in the contents and you see some data that you'd like to add to a map, you can always right-click and you can add it to the current map, you can add it to a new map or to a new scene. So this is kind of a nice shortcut where instead of me having to go to insert and pick new map and make the map and then add the layer, I just right-click on the layer and add it to a brand new map, and it does all that for me right away. And then we can check the weather and see how it's going on the East Coast over there. All right, so for now, we've looked at the project and that the project is made up of items, and your user is always connected to a portal, and we can find out who they are, what groups they belong to, and then we can have our code react based on some of that information. Or we could just go to the portal and look for some data that's there and add it to the map. Maybe you create some services that you put out there, you find your services, and then add them to the map. Okay, what else I want to do? I want to map a folder connection here over to my C drive. All right, I want to go to our sample data for the community samples. This is the one I was pointing to earlier that you could go to the elections data. So this folder here is what you download for the community samples data. And I'm just going into the US here in the States. So a couple other things you may want to do are to interact with a geodatabase. So you may want to get to a geodatabase. You might want to do something to a feature class inside of a geodatabase. You might want to add it to the map. You might want your user to edit that feature class. So you might create a tool, and then your user might digitize or edit or do something to that data. So from the project, we could do a little bit of navigation, or if you knew where the database was stored, we could connect to the database, get a feature class, and add it to a map. Or the other way around, what if you didn't have any data to start with? You could write a little bit of code that makes a geodatabase, that makes a feature class, that adds some fields to the feature class, and then adds it to the map. So that's the other piece we're going to be looking at, is how to interact with data inside of a geodatabase, either getting data that's already there or creating new data. What do you do now to make a new feature class? How do you make a new feature class?
You right-click on a geodatabase and say
Okay, so from the user standpoint, right-click and then there's a new, and new feature class would be a way to do it. What happens when I click here? What has just happened? I got to a geoprocessing tool. So there's the create feature class tool from the toolbox. How do you run this same thing in your code? What method do you use? Geoprocessing object, and then what method? What was that? Yes, yes, execute tool async. So within your code, if you want to create a new feature class, you'll run execute tool async, and you'll pass in this tool and all of its parameters. That's how you go about making a new feature class. If you were going to be doing things to this feature class like adding fields, well, if I go to the toolbox, there's a tool called add field. So again, you could do another execute tool async and call add field and pass in the parameters to add a new field. All right, the last thing, well, not the last thing, but I want to show something with tools. So I'm going to come to my Visual Studio project here, and in the last lesson part, I made a couple of buttons here. I'm going to change gears and create a new tool. So just like you make a button, you go to the project and right-click and add new item. In the list, down near the bottom, one of the items that you can add is a map tool. With a map tool, I'm going to get my user to do some drawing on the map. So I'll go ahead and add that tool. All right, the tool just got added into the project. I want to look at the DAML first so you can see what got added in here for the DAML part. Not that much. So in the DAML, we get a tool. The tool has a caption. I'm going to change the name of my tool here. I'm going to call it Draw Polygon. All right, and then now let's take a look at the C# code that got generated for this class. All right. And as we look at the code here, it's not a click event, right? Because you don't click on the tool, you might activate it. So yeah, as the user clicks it, the tool becomes active. You could have some code run when the tool becomes active. What we really want is this one here. With a tool, your user is going to draw some geometry. Whatever they draw goes into this variable. So inside this method, on sketch complete async, you get their geometry and you could do something with it. What would you do with geometry that your user has sketched up for you? Okay, so make features out of it? What else? Buffer, use it in a tool?
Use it to select from, like if they drew something, you select things within that. You do that.
All right, we might use it in a buffer. We might use it in a select. Select, what is the select? Select by spatial, the spatial selection? Select by location. So, okay, make features in a geodatabase. Use the geometry to buffer, to select, to feed in somewhere to a tool. Okay, draw a graphic. So lots of things you could do with the geometry after the user creates it. You get to decide. That's where you become creative and decide what happens. You might make some kind of a special editing tool. So as users looking at a feature on the map, maybe they do something to that feature with a tool and it cuts the line into two parts or does something special. So yeah, your tool could have extra special functionality to it besides just creating new data or drawing or using it in another tool. You might actually be doing something special to the geometry. Oh, I forgot the top part here. As the tool gets initialized, we have a couple of parameters up here. The main one is right here, the geometry type. What is it that you want your user to draw? Are they just going to be putting a point or a line or a polygon or a square, a rectangle? Right now, the default is set to rectangle. That might be good if they're making a box and they want to select things that are inside that box. But let's take a look at the other options here of what can you do with the tool? What can you draw with that tool? There's a variety of curves and ellipse, angled rectangle, a circle. If we look through here, you'll see the basics, point, line, and polygon. You could do the lasso, and that's where the user doesn't have to click, but they're just kind of moving around on the map and doing like a freehand. Well, I called my, I gave my tool a name, Draw Polygon. So that's what I want to put in here for the geometry. I want to sketch out a polygon. Oh, capital P. All right. Well, I don't have a lot of code here, but we're still going to be able to see the behavior. So let me go ahead and start this up, and we'll get a look at what the tool is doing so far. All right, when I go to the add-in, here's my new tool over here. Caption is Draw Polygon. So my user grabs the tool, they come over to the map, and they can click and draw a polygon. When they're finished, they give a double click and they're finished. They're done with the polygon, and then I get the geometry in my code. So I can decide what to do with this polygon. Maybe I use it to make a selection. Well, since I don't have anything going on in the finished sketch, well, it just disappears. So I can see I'm drawing in the polygon. When I finish it, though, I don't really do anything with it. I don't have any code yet to do something. But I really want to take this polygon and draw it, use it in another operation, or add it to a geodatabase. All right, we'll take a look at a little bit of code here for working with a project. So let's leave tool here for now. And I'm going to come back over to the sample here. Let's look at project. All right, so how do you do this in ArcObjects? There are a couple of those classes that it's like the class is there to begin with. You don't need to make a variable for it. You can get to the, what do you have, the map document and a couple others. So here, project is like that, where, hey, project is always there. You can write code to get the current project and then do something with the current project. Maybe get its, here we're just getting its name, nothing special, and its path. If you wanted to create a new project, on project, there's a create async method. So with this one, it needs to have some project settings. So here we're going about creating some new project settings, the name, the path, and if we're, in this case, I'm calling on the map template and using the map template. You might have your own templates. So when you start up Pro, there's that list of 4 templates, scene and globe and map. You could potentially be making your own templates so that when Pro opens up, it has certain maps in it already, and you do that as part of designing a template. So here, you could open up one of the Esri templates, or if you've made your own, you could create a project using your own template. I talked about the project items. One of the items inside of a project are the folder connection project items. And if you want to create any new items, we have several factories. There are factories like a map factory, a layout factory. So you would use the factory to create new instances of map or layout, or in this case, just a folder connection. Up above here, I've set up a couple of folder connections to my student folder and demo data folder. And then in a queued task, I'm using the two create methods over here. These are synchronous methods, and creating new folder connections. On the user side, we call them folder connections. On the programming side, those are project items. They're folder connection project items, where we could have map project items or layout project items and create them using the appropriate factory. All right, last bit of code here on projects. And continuing on the idea with factories, here I'm using the map factory and creating a new map. And I give the map a name and the type. The viewing mode would be map, or it could be a globe, or it could be a scene. And then you have the option also to put a base map in there too. So here I'm creating a map. I happen to be calling it Hawaii. When I use the map factory to create a map, it's going to add it to the map project item, and we could see it inside there, but it doesn't automatically open it up and display it to the user. To do that, I've got an extra method here, create map pane. It's an asynchronous method. So this one takes the map and opens it up so that it has a tab and that your user can start interacting with the map. The last bit that we're doing here is setting up an envelope, just a rectangle, because we want its full extent. When you click on the full extent button, we want it to be zoomed to Hawaii. So your user might be interacting with the data, and when they click zoom to full extent, it doesn't go out to the whole world, but for this map, the full extent will be Hawaii. This will be one of the ones you try out in the exercise. In the exercise part. All right, on the portal side, let's see here. I don't know if I want to go into this one right now. What are we going to do here? Okay, I'm going to hold off on this one for now. And let's take a look at Geodatabase, creating a Geodatabase. Earlier I was talking to you about creating Geodatabase feature classes and how normally you would just right-click and make a new feature class. With what really happens though is you're calling a tool. So I would do the same thing then if I was going to be making a feature class. Let's see here. Let me cue this up again here. All right, so here we talked about using execute tool async and just calling on the create feature class tool from the management toolbox. When you create a feature class, though, you have all those parameters, and we need to have a way to pass in those parameters. One of the ways to do that is with something called a value array. The array contains the parameter name and the value that you want stored for the parameter. So if I back up a little bit here, to make this feature class, that's not the feature class, that looks like a field up there. To make the feature class, we have to describe what database it's going to go into. We have to give the feature class a name and decide whether it's point, line, or polygon. Yeah, I don't know if the others here are all that important, but then we need a parameter for the spatial reference. What coordinate system will we be using? Will it be a geographic coordinate system or projected coordinate system? Do you all have a coordinate system that you use most of the time? What's your preferred coordinate system? 4326? WGS 84. 4326. If you're from out of town, maybe a different one? Out of the country? Okay. Good that you got it memorized. Any other ones? These 3419. What is that?
Eastern Kansas state line.
It's Eastern Kansas. Okay. Any others? You guys are easy. What coordinate system does Pro use? So here I'm just opening up Pro. There's going to be a base map in there, right, when you create a new map? What coordinate system is that? What coordinate system does ArcGIS Online and Google and Bing Maps? Yes, Web Mercator. So if we go to the map and we look at its properties and look at the coordinate system,
That's
it's...
based on the coordinate system that feature class was created in, right?
I've kind of veered away. When you create a feature class, you have to define its coordinate system.
Right.
And then I was kind of asking, well, what coordinate systems does everybody use? And the common one is WGS 84, but if you're in a certain locale like Kansas or Britain, you might have a different.
But when you're saying is this the default for ArcGIS Pro, or is this what that feature, that layer happens to be based on?
Yeah, I haven't added any layers yet to the map.
Well, that's a layer right there.
So this one is what is this layer? A base map? Why is it there?
For convenience.
Like when you're in ArcMap, you don't get layers, do you?
I think it's just for convenience, so somebody has a base map ready to use.
Yeah, you got a ready-to-use base map right there.
Too many users, beginning users probably complain, how do I see something? I open it up, why don't I see it?
Okay, yeah, an ArcMap, you...
Google Earth, so they're using it.
I want to see the map right away when I open the product. I got to see a map. Okay. So when you make a new map, you get a base map, and the base maps all use the Web Mercator auxiliary sphere coordinate system. What happens when I add a layer to the map? Does it keep that coordinate system? Let's see, I've got the Iowa counties. So my Iowa counties use a different coordinate system. They use a different geographic coordinate system. Instead of WGS 84, they use North American Datum of 83 for their geographic coordinate system. Why am I getting this warning?
Because it's going to do a conversion, it's letting you know that it's going to use that, whatever, do the conversion of the geographic coordinate system.
Okay, yeah, it wants to transform my data from this coordinate system over to WGS 84, and it's telling me, is it okay if I use this math formula for you? If I click OK here, well, then it should just add, well, it's already added the data to the map, but it might need a little bit of adjustment using this formula here.
If you do a drop down, you probably have a selection of others too, right?
In the drop down, I see lots of others.
Now, who would know what the difference between those? There's several.
I could eliminate some right away because we're not in Alaska, so those could go. The software does a little bit of geometry checking on your data, and it tries to build this list thinking that, okay, you're in Iowa, probably you're going to use this transformation here would be most common, and then going down the line, these might be the next most common transformations. You might have to try a couple of them. It looks like some of them are, I don't know why it brought up the 27s here, but I could eliminate those probably. Don't know. I might try a couple just to make sure that I'm getting one that fits the best. But usually it's going to try to do the best it can and figure out what would be the best one. So now, is my map still in the Web Mercator, or did my base map change?
The base map, the map's spatial reference stayed the same, but the spatial reference of your new feature class just added change.
Okay, so hold on. When we first looked, this was Web Mercator, the map, because my base map is Web Mercator, but now I've put in the NAD83 data. So I'm wondering, did this change up here?
No.
Or is my map still Web Mercator? So the counties, we think, are now being transformed and projected into Web Mercator. That's what we think should be going on. Let's take a look. So the map actually changed. We didn't expect that, but the map changed to match Iowa, to match its coordinate system. The first layer that you add to the map will change the coordinate system. My other data, the base map, is still in the WGS84 Web Mercator Auxiliary Sphere coordinate system.
That doesn't really count as the layer that defines the coordinates.
Because it's a base map, and just like ArcMap, when you add a layer to ArcMap, the data frame changes.
So they're thinking that the user would probably want the coordinate system to be in the data set, the coordinate system of the data they brought in, not what was automatically there when you opened it.
Yes.
If that wasn't a base map, if that was another real layer, then it would have changed.
Yeah.
The map would have changed.
Okay, so now this is what we've got to end up with. The map changed to match the layer that I added. The base map is still Web Mercator, but it is being changed, its coordinate. And you can tell there's something strange because the names, look at like in the background, some of the names are kind of stretched out now because the base map is being projected into the new coordinate system. So it might not look as crisp as it did before. As I start zooming in on some of the cities, it might lose a little crispness because of the projection. Especially as we go to the north, you can't even read the names of the places up in the north. All right, so back to our tool. As you're picking your coordinate systems, you also want to be aware of how adding a layer to your map might affect the map based on its coordinate system. All right, for the most part, though, most organizations, you all have an established coordinate system that you probably use most of the time. If the base map is no longer appropriate because it's being projected, you may not use the base map from Esri, or you might create your own base map. All right, I guess that's enough for now. We only have about 10 minutes left here. I'm going to hang out if you want to try out an exercise or two. The web page here, I'll leave it up probably for a couple of weeks yet. And yeah, so if you, at any time, if you want to hit the website here and and look at, or I think you can download these. They're just PDF files, so you could bring them local to yourself if you want them. Otherwise, that's going to be it for me. I'll hang out here and answer questions for you as needed. Yes.
So the ArcMap add-in that I need to recreate, it's very simple. It brings a pop-up, it looks at a directory on our network, and based on all the subdirectories in that directory, it creates a tab once for each subdirectory.
Okay.
As the user selects a tab, there's a list of layer files in there, and it creates a checkbox for each layer file. Click on your collection of layers you want to add to your map, hit go, close up that dialog box, and add those layers via the layer files to the map.
Okay.
What would you recommend being the easiest, the lowest hanging fruit path of least resistance? you showed the tree view briefly. Would that be a way to go? So in the add-in tab of the ribbon at the top, I have my add layers button, and then I'm hoping I could open up a side panel with maybe a tree view to my subdirectories and layers, or what would you recommend?
So your goal is to allow your user to find layers and add them to their map. Okay.
While maintaining that organization of the subdirectories and layer files.
Could they look over in here in the project? Could you give them a, like in the folders, could you connect them?
I think so. You would think that'd be easy enough to, but I can't deploy, or when everybody installs ArcGIS, I'd have to give them instruction, hey, go set up this folder. Go create a connection to this one folder on the network. And they don't want to do that. They want to have it installed, bam, boom, ready to go. They click their add. Just like the add-in is already there for them. They just want to click that button and see that pop up and be able to start select. And the one that's familiar as it currently is. So I'm even doing a stretch by suggesting, hey, could I give them a tree view? They might even balk at that.
But currently you just have it in a form, and you have tabs on the form, and
Exactly.
okay. Could you do your own pane over here? Like make your own pane?
That'd be fine. And I'm mainly wondering what's the easiest for, because they're going to be adding directories and adding layer files, so it's not going to be a predefined list.
How do they get started? Did they pick a folder for you?
Yeah, we, the development crew, predefined a folder on the network where other people on our team have access to add directories and layer files as they want. And so, yeah, in the code I will be hard coding, hey, look in this base folder on the network.
Would it be the same? Would they all be mapped to the same folder from their same drive?
Yes.
So they'd all have like the F drive, and everybody's F drive goes to that folder.
Not map, no.
Oh.
It's whack, full, unqualified, full qualified domain name.
UNC paths.
Yeah, exactly. That's how the ArcMap version of this.
Okay.
Start by looking in this folder, create a tab for every subfolder, create a checkbox for the layer file.
So you could have some code, and this may not work for you, but I'm just going to give you one example to start with. Your code could add a folder here, right in here, and then they would just open that folder and it would be connected to that UNC path for them.
That's your recommendation of the path of least resistance.
So you might have a button that they click on. When they click the button, then when they go look in their folders list, they have an extra folder in here that you've prepared.
Would that be something that a configuration could handle? The configuration so that when ArcMap
Yes.
loaded, that folder could be listed there?
The configuration could automatically put it in.
Okay.
Yes. The next level would be to try to recreate what you've already got, and then in Visual Studio you would add in a dock pane. I've already got a dock pane in here. And then when you're in the dock pane, come on over to the WPF controls. And I'm just looking here, there are checkboxes and there are tabs. So you could potentially recreate it using dock panes over here. You could put tabs on there, and then you could have your checkboxes in there too.
With the MVVM, is that kind of really complicated to dynamically, create tabs based on the folder structure and create checkboxes based on the...
Whew.
I see steam coming out of your...
Yeah, I would like to try that sometime. But it should be possible to dynamically generate the tabs. Why, sure. So that must be about what you do now. You have a form, and you generate the tabs for the form.
And in all honesty, my predecessor made it, and they left, and I do have access to that code, but that's in the...
Okay. Yes. Different pattern. Different pattern, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Try to get the users used to just use the tree over there and find their layers using the tree.
Does Pro have the capability of bringing the Excel sheet with the ID that match the polygon ID and map kind of like select by attribute, but get it from the Excel sheet?
So you have an Excel spreadsheet, and what do you want to do with the Excel spreadsheet?
Like it has all this ID.
You have IDs in the spreadsheet, and you have IDs in a feature class, and you want to connect them together? Yeah, could you do a join? You could add the spreadsheet to ArcMap. Or ArcMap. You got me talking about ArcMap now. Hold on.
I just wonder if Pro already have a tool for you to open the Excel spreadsheet and pick a column that has the ID you want.
Yes. I might have an example right here that I could show you. Give me just a moment to figure out. I have some data that would support that. Okay. Add it. Oh. Okay. Demo data. I have to figure out where my data is. I think it's not in there. Oh. Where did I put? Oh, it might just be under Esri training. And then Pro. Okay. Oh, come on. I can't figure out where my data is. Did I have it in here? All right. I had a spreadsheet. Where did I go with that spreadsheet? In the end, let's say that I had some data that goes with Iowa in a spreadsheet. You would go to the feature class, or first of all, you would find the spreadsheet. It'll show up over here in the tree view, and then you would add the spreadsheet, and it'll show up over here in the table of contents. And then you would go to the layer and right-click on the layer, and then there's the join. And with join, you can take the two tables and join them together if there's common IDs in both tables. What was that?
I said the user is not going to do that. I was hoping it's an easy way to drag and drop that Excel to pop up the question which column and stuff. I wrote that in for them to do it automatically.
You have an add-in to do it automatically, but there's too many steps involved to add the layer. You're saying that this involves too many steps to add the layers and then make the join. Yeah, with the join, they would have to get to the add join, and then it brings up this tool, and then they would have to fill out, like here's the layer, the join table would be the Excel spreadsheet, And then they would have to choose the 2 ID fields in both tables. But you want to make that easier.
Right. They all want is one click.
A 1-click, okay.
Everything happens, right?
Yes, yes.
Can't this thing think for me?
So while you have the map, could you please show me how I could see the layout view of the map?
A layout. You want to see the layout?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, so on the Insert tab, let me zoom in here. On the Insert tab, you can make a new layout, pick a paper size. So I'll choose just letter and landscape. And then you get a layout that opens up.
But the map is not in there.
You got to add the map.
In ArcMap, it automatically shows your map in layout.
That's because there was only one layout. Now you can have many layouts. And then you can decide what maps to add in there, but you got to add the map yourself. You could write a little code to automatically put maps in there, but you might have many maps. How would you know which one to put in the layout?
Yeah, I'm so used to ArcMap, it works with that one map.
One map, one layout. Okay. Oh my gosh, too many options. That's good. Yeah, and then once you make the layout, on the Insert menu, then here you could put in the Insert, the north arrow, and the scale bar, and like the dynamic text. You can add all those things onto the page. You can add a graticule over here pretty easily. You could, what else have we got here for layout? You could do a map book, like we call it a map series. You could make a map series. So I could put each county on its own page and make a PDF file out of it. Okay.
Now when I open up any pro project, all those silly add-ins are there. How do I get rid of them if I don't want them?
All right, so you got the add-in tab now, and after class here, you've got 10 or 15 different buttons.
They're all just for these little demos.
How do you get rid of them?
How do you get rid of them?
Go to the backstage area, to the add-in manager,
Oh, the add-in man, okay.
and then you'll see all of your add-ins here. You could just select them, and then there's a delete in the lower right corner to delete the add-ins.
Let me make sure my memory, I have to actually do this.
Okay, that's okay.
So you go into Pro here.
You can do it with the DAML also, right?
Yeah, you have to go.
No.
Edit the DAML.
But there's many DAMLs involved. I mean, there's many projects here, right?
We're talking about removing add-ins from Pro. You might be talking about just removing a button or two. If you just wanted to get rid of a button, you could go to the DAML and get rid of it there. But he's talking about, he's got all these add-ins and wants to get rid of all the add-ins.
Go to the add-in manager,
Yes.
and then you can just right-click on it, or drag it, tells you to select them, and then delete the ones you want to delete.
Yeah, you got to go all the way over to the lower right corner to delete,
Do that, delete.
because they really want to make sure that you do want to delete it
Okay.
before you delete it.
But what's kind of, the only other thing that's kind of funny about that is, I'm sorry, I closed it. It seems to have in the add-in thing, it has the project. So you have to know which project the add-in you want to delete is in. You know what I'm saying? I don't know, I can show you.
An add-in is just a file.
Okay, when I click on add-ins, I see, button 4, group 1, select county, group 1, button 1, group 2, edit points. I see the name like that.
Like right in here, you see the name here.
But that's the name of the module. That's what, it doesn't show me which add-ins are in that module.
This is the name of the add-in. I didn't give mine a very descriptive name, so it's usually just Pro App Module 1, 2, 3, unless you give it a better name.
Yeah. But when you click the add-in tab, and you see the buttons there, you don't know which
I don't. Yeah. I can't. I use bad names. If I use better names, then
I'll work through it.
okay.
I'll work on it. Thank you, though, that helps.
Yeah.
So while deleting the add-in, I just remove it from my Pro, but the file is
Still there.
in my system. Can I change my mind? Add them later?
When you in Visual Studio, when you compile the add-in, it put it into this folder here, into the user profile folder. If I say delete the add-in, it goes to this folder and it deletes that file, and that file's gone.
So how can I remove from the Pro, ArcGIS Pro, like I have many users, one different
users use different add-ins.
yes, I don't want to just show in the map file or that, but I still want to add in the system.
You want to keep the add-in around, you just don't want Pro to use it. You got to put it in a different folder then. So instead of deleting it here, let me go to get rid of this one. So here I'll go to this module 32. I got to remember a number over here. It starts 486. Are you guys up next? Oh boy. We got to get out of here. Okay.
Because in ArcMap, you can choose to add it to show up in your ArcMap file. You don't go to customize tool and drag it, add it to drop on the toolbox. If you don't do that, the user don't see that add-in. You still have that add-in,
Still there.
to use as other ArcMap applications.
Okay.
So I find that convenient. This is automatically shown on the Pro.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.